Wonderful. So on to the non-action items. Item A is a discussion on the Housing Trust Fund. I don't know if do I defer to the clerk or to you, Mr. Trout?
A is a discussion concerning affordable housing and the Topeka Housing Trust Fund.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Governing body, tonight we'll go through proposed changes to the ordinance related to the Housing Trust Fund. Part of our process in meetings that I've had with members of JUMP, we looked at a couple of different things, and this also sort of relates to what we've been doing with the Affordable Housing Task Force, which will be coming forward with presentations of their recommendations related to that. But this focuses on a specific issue related to the Housing Trust Fund that we have. In our analysis of it, we determined that there were issues related to the ability to really utilize this trust fund setup in order to be able to move forward considerations of projects and to receive monies that then would be able to be paid back out to organizations that projects that we might consider wanting to do related to the housing, affordable housing within our community. You know, it's one thing to have the discussion related to whether or not we fund it, but if we don't have a mechanism that allows us to be able to expend funds that we may receive by donation, or at some point if the governing body ever decided to fund through the budget, we needed a mechanism that would allow us to be able to consider projects, decide if they fit the goals of affordable housing that we have set, and then at that point make a decision to move a project forward by providing a funding. So this outlines it. Legal and I work together relative to what it would look like, and so it presents a mechanism. Now, when I looked at this, I looked at it as something that we needed a better mechanism to be able to do it. And so as you look at the members of the committee that would review the Housing Trust Fund, you'll see that it's staff. I've looked at a number of individuals that would have experience and knowledge that would be able to bring forward projects. Typically, when we have an affordable housing type project, as you saw tonight working with Habitat for Humanity, we end up with a situation of being able to make relationships that we build with various partners, and they oftentimes come to us regarding these affordable housing projects for various partnerships. And so I felt that working it through Department of Neighborhood Relations as the chair of that committee, comprising of the Deputy City Manager, Director of Financial Services, Director of Planning, Division Director of Housing Service, and Senior Grants Program Administrator, those people would be best suited, I feel, to evaluate whether a project proposal was appropriate. And then through that analysis, make a recommendation to me to make a decision. Now, as I say all that, this is a proposal, and I would welcome any recommendations or considerations that would be interested. I'm not married, I think, to any of these specific clauses, but it was simply a starting point relative to the discussion about what we would want our Housing Trust Fund mechanism to look like. However, it does give you in the framework what I consider to be good sticking points relative to our consideration of projects. In the review of the applications, there are, I won't read them all because they're long, but there are 7 particular issues that are to be considered that all relate to whether this is a good project or not. So with that, that gives staff the guidelines that we will utilize in order to consider whether a project's appropriate or not. And in here, it recommends that, that I am the deciding authority rather to grant funding. But that is where it sets right now. If there was a desire relative to the governing body that decision would come before you to be considered, since it is trust fund money that's granted, I'm willing to entertain that. But I think oftentimes if it meets those requirements that are listed in the application process, that it is likely one that we should be pursuing. So I guess I'll leave it up for questions, stand for questions if you may have any.
Are there initial comments or questions? There were 2 folks who wanted to speak but did not get signed up in time, so they've asked if we would entertain a motion to suspend the rules so that they could. Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Mayor, I'd like to suspend the rules to allow the two names that were given to you by the jump representatives, I believe it was, to speak. Allow them 4 minutes.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor, yes. Opposed, vote no.
Nine yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion is approved. Ms. Clear, did you have a comment?
Yes. And this may be a really silly one, because I may have missed it. Why is the city taking this on and not another agency or a nonprofit, or why are we doing it?
Councilwoman Clear, in respect to that, there are times where we may be able to secure grant funding, and if we did so, we could put it in the Housing Trust Fund. Also, there may be an individual that may support the city and look for a mechanism, a place to make a contribution to the city. If this would be something they would be interested in, then we would have a mechanism set up for them to be able to give to the city, knowing that it would be targeted for this particular thing, so that if they were to make just a donation to the city, we might be able to use it for whatever means. If they made it specifically to the Housing Trust Fund, they would be ensured that it would be utilized on housing if that were their issue they wanted to support.
Do we get very many donations to the city?
No, oftentimes we have not. The question would be, is that because we haven't had the right trust fund set up, or because we haven't had a donation, a person that is interested in providing a donation? So rather than guess which it is, we set it up, and the ability provided to us with this trust fund would allow us to at least be able to accept that donation in a manner that would work.
I just hope people don't say, think I'm giving to the city and not, you know what I mean? Say, I'm not giving anything to the city, where
Yeah.
we've got to really differentiate the two.
Right. And I will say that actually tonight's presentation on Kay's Garden is an example of someone wanting to provide it to the city. They're utilizing a trust through the Friends of the Zoo, a trust that then gives the money to the city to make the contribution. So it is a good example of what, in a way, we're trying to set up by establishing this housing trust fund in this manner.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
And to piggyback on that, a trust that will take care of that, everlasting. Being on the council 13 years, I've had people say, I don't want my house no more, let the city have it. They think sometimes if they just let it go that we could have it. And I know we've had this conversation before, we're not a land bank. That's what I will be looking at, to be real careful with that we don't get properties that's gonna cost us a lot. I just wanna make sure of that. I also will be looking for maybe like a percentage. I'll be looking at everything across the table, but also like maybe a percentage of taxes or something that we could charge to get them started, to get it started on however we do it. I think that we can do it that way. I've seen other towns do it that way. But having said that, I look at the fact that, when downtown wanted to be redeveloped and they came forward and they said, we want all these bells and whistles, and we said, no, we're going to do the essentials, the streets, because this is taxpayers' money. And then we had all these private partnerships. And what I heard tonight was the private partnerships from the faith base, and I thought that was great, because I think however we set it up, we could do that. I just want to be real careful that we're not getting ourselves into, because this discussion has been had before, with Randy Speaker, who was very well in tune with it, but when the council looked at all it would entail and all it would charge us, that's what we really need to look at, is how we're going to keep it going. I'm not saying it's not needed, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that I won't support it, I just want to make sure that when it's done, that we all understand what's happening. Thank you.
Other comments before public comment?
I'll have a few afterwards.
Okay,
That's fine.
no problem. Carol Babcock, followed by Joanne.
Hi, I'm Carol Babcock. I'm a member of Lowman United Methodist Church. I reside in Ms. Hiller's district at 1006 Southwest 8th and a member of JUMP. Mr. City Manager, thank you for following through on your commitment to revise the Housing Trust Fund ordinance so that it may be used as a mechanism to target dollars towards affordable housing. Thank you to the mayor and to Karen Hiller for your continued attention to this work. While there are no dollars to target yet, having a plan in place gives the city a great tool should the council decide to invest in affordable housing. I would like to think of this draft ordinance as a working document and recommend a collaborative work session of interested parties to iron out the details and find answers to everyone's questions moving forward. From JUMP's perspective, there are at least 3 unanswered questions. 1, is there a need for a more diverse, experienced group of people to have a say in what gets recommended to the governing body? By diverse, we mean including low-income residents, developers, and bankers. The city manager made a valid point to us. Should we have volunteers if this fund will be used infrequently? I would suggest that the work is important, and if asked to gather with purpose, the appropriate parties would do so. We are not discussing funding today, but something to consider for the future is question 2. Would a steady stream of public funding attract other types of dollars, private or otherwise, to this city? The third and perhaps the most important question is why? Why have this conversation at all? For me personally, it's because it's time to do this. It's time for this city to make a serious commitment to addressing a serious problem. I personally know many people and have family members who have struggled or are currently struggling with housing. It only gets worse. It is time. As for the Topeka community, many providers have come forward in the task force meetings to talk about how folks in various circumstances are left without a housing option. Residents feel that North Central and East Topeka have been forgotten. I do see tides turning in many ways, like the establishment of the East Topeka Learning Center. However, the trust fund could encourage development that invest in those deteriorating neighborhoods. Unlike SORT, the trust fund could support 2 or 3 projects in 2 or 3 different neighborhoods, instead of having to wait 3 to 6 years to have a turn. Residents with a record or a history of evictions at some point need to be able to live on their own. Nobody wants them, and yet they need a place to live if they will be contributing members of society. The trust fund could support more second chance landlord options. Residents who are on the brink of homelessness need transitional housing options. THA and the Rescue Mission have been known to do work to help folks when they are close to getting evicted or when they've been uprooted, like in a domestic violence situation. The trust fund could prioritize these kinds of options. We're not talking about homeowners. We're not necessarily talking about folks making the area median income or more, although domestic violence is no respecter of persons. The YWCA can attest to that. There is a population that is voiceless in the economic development conversation. There is a population that is voiceless in the city budget conversation. They are the folks on the THA waiting list. They're the folks surfing couches. May I request extra time to finish this?
How much time do you need?
About 2 more minutes.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Motion is second. All those in favor, vote yes. Nine having voted yes, you have 2 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. They're the folks the city only knows exist because their child's school social worker knows their housing challenges. JUMP is glad to be a part of the Affordable Housing Task Force that discusses an array of ways to serve this population, education, support services, etc. But the trust fund is designed to specifically address projects for rehabilitation and building homes. It does not matter what I believe. Does not matter what the 900 people who intentionally organized to demonstrate their support believes. What matters is whether a critical mass of you believe that our low-income neighborhoods have deteriorated enough to need a strategic plan. That's what an effective housing trust fund does. It serves a strategic business plan to preserve and construct affordable housing. 9 years ago, the question was, do we need to fix our streets? You all arrived at a yes, and the city came up with a business plan, which led to the 1/2 cent sales tax increase and a list of projects to happen over a series of years. Today, the question is, do we need to fix affordable housing? I say yes. 900 other people say yes. But the only yeses that can make something happen are up here on this platform. If the answer is yes, then the only response is to develop a strategic plan to fix it, and that's what a trust fund done correctly will do. Again, thank you for having this discussion. This proven practice can make Topeka a better place to live, work, and do business. Thank you again.
Thank you for your comments. Joanne Smith?
Good evening. My name is Joanne Smith. I am in Council District Number 3 with Councilwoman Sylvia Ortiz, and thank you for this opportunity. I am sharing a testimony actually from Hannah McGay, who is a discharge planner at the Shawnee County Jail regarding the need for the affordable housing. And I would like to thank the City Council for the opportunity to voice some concerns I have about the current housing climate in the capital city and surrounding areas. As a discharge planner at the Shawnee County Jail, fair and affordable housing has been a significant issue for most of my clients. Typically, these particular clients also struggle with serious and persistent mental illness, as well as some form of chemical dependency. One of the biggest challenges they face upon release is finding somewhere affordable, clean, and safe to live within a timely manner. For many of them, they are effectively homeless upon arrest. Typically, their housing situation was rocky at best even before incarceration, and the resources available to them while incarcerated are limited. The reality for many of them is that even if they are provided with case management or some form of assistance while incarcerated, they are still looking at a lengthy time period before they can get settled in some form of residence. Typically, during that time, they find themselves in a particularly vulnerable position and can fall prey to victimization, abuse, and toxic living environments. I firmly believe that if the city of Topeka can address the affordable housing shortage, rates of incarceration and recidivism will decrease because that gap period will be dissolved. The gap period I refer to is a time between release and what most of us would consider stability and independent living. While there are many great resources in the community, such as the Topeka Housing Authority, Breakthrough House, Vallejo Behavioral Health, and many others, the issue is the supply is not meeting the demand. Specifically for those who suffer from serious and persistent mental illness, the acuity of their mental status is too severe to survive on a wait list, and they invariably either get incarcerated or victimized in some way. I fully support the community shareholders who have put this platform together in trying to recognize the severe housing crisis that we are facing in the Topeka area. While I can acknowledge this issue is multifaceted and must be met with multidisciplinary measures, I can say with full sincerity the central theme for most of my clients is housing instability. Think of how much easier it would be to get medical appointments, mental health appointments, job interviews, and other necessary obligations if you as a person did not have to worry about questionable personal safety or lack of transportation based on changing geographic location. Consider the quality of life increase for those children of my clients who may be able to escape the cycle of poverty if they were able to sleep in the same bed every night and not have to worry about things that children shouldn't even have to consider. Thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to seeing what the Topeka City Council, other community shareholders can create in order to improve the quality of life for those who are inevitably the most vulnerable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. So with that said, you had some comments, Ms. Hiller?
I do, thank you. I accepted the invitation from Jump to sit with them when they visited with the city manager. And so just to kind of, I do appreciate Ms. Bradbury's suggestion that there be a work session. But I thought I have worked on it and thought I would just run through some of the things, my reactions and things I observed. Overall, I think that the city manager has done a good job at putting together something that would update what we've had before. I didn't have time to go back and look at some earlier drafts. The Jump folks told me they liked some things I'd said to them in the last email I sent to them, and I gotta go find it and see what that was, which I'll do. But having the staff be the primary committee, I think the city manager did identify people that normally would get called in anyway, and the beauty of that gives it some flexibility and timelessness so that if an opportunity comes, they could be convened quickly. There is, I think, some language in here that if there's an opportunity, we would turn it around or at least address it in 30 days. If you've got a citizen group, however well qualified, that doesn't meet very often, it takes a lot of time just to get them together, get them briefed up, get them current. And I think this is a lean, responsive situation. We did run into some discussion that the Citizen Advisory Council is listed in here in the definitions and is listed as that part of its function is to advise the Department of Neighborhood Relations as to community needs and the allocation of city, federal, and housing trust funds, but they don't get mentioned later in the allocation process. I think it's a fit to include them, to advise it, and covers a lot of the suggestions that the Jump folks have had, that very low income people and people from the different neighborhoods who are knowledgeable about different kinds of housing and needs, without having to create yet another board or authority. I thought that flexibility could work pretty well. Jumping ahead to what the city manager said, he was kind of assuming at first that it would go to the council. I think that's a good check and balance. And the council is timing rather than have the city manager have the sole authority. It gets it out in front of us. It helps get donations. It helps make sure we're all connecting the dots on what we're doing with our federal money as well as other programs. So I think that would work the best. There was discussion quite a bit in here about how the trust fund would consider and allocate putting money out. Someone touched on it earlier, Councilwoman Ortiz, I think. I think it's very important to have language that same board structure, at least the staff structure, would review and make a decision on whether to accept a contribution. Because you don't know whether somebody's going to offer you money or securities, or you just don't know. And that's a good check and balance, or land, or a crummy house that fell down, and something that development directors for hospitals and schools and anybody who does much development knows is you don't want to accept just every gift. It's not always a good idea. I also do think, however, that if either a neighborhood or the staff or Jump, whoever is fundraising and comes up with an opportunity, there might be a donor similar to Judge McFarland who would want to designate a use for their money. And I think the language in here should accommodate that a donor could designate a use for their funds, whether it's a long-term endowment, whether it's to be used in a certain part of town, whatever. And I think it's worth it to have that language in here. The Jump folks commented that they liked, correct me if I'm wrong, that they liked that there's a series of 7 questions that the city manager put in here about how the group might evaluate funds. The Jump folks' comments that day were that they liked them. Something that I wondered if just deserved a little more thought would be prioritization. Right now, we don't have any activity at all, but maybe you had a big chunk of money and multiple applications. Would it be worth it to go back through here and think a little bit, which is some language that Jump had proposed before in terms of prioritizing. Maybe not, but I think it's worth consideration when the group looks at it. And I think there's some technical language things that when the time comes, I would work on. There's discussion that there's a good list of all the different kinds of things that the trust fund funding could be used for, but you get into some language in the back, for instance, that makes reference to support services only in relation to homeless people. I think the intent was probably broader than that, and it's worked well in home buyer and rental to do that. So there's some technical things when the time comes.
Okay.
And that's all. I think it's a good, fresh start on moving something down the line.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, I have a couple of questions. My understanding is this just covers cash, essentially, that there isn't a mechanism for handling property donations, or there isn't a land bank type component to that. Is that correct?
It is not a land bank. That is not the intent. It is a trust fund. It is also, it states monies placed in the housing trust fund through donations or otherwise will provide resources that can be used to address community, blah, blah, blah. It's really intended to receive monies versus to receive properties.
Okay.
But I will take a look at whether or not there needs to be some changes, that if, the idea being that if land was donated, it would be decided whether it should be sold in the money and then converted into monies, or if it should be, if it's a prime lot that could be developed, how we would do that. The land bank idea is something that is one of the items that's part of the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations, and would like to look at that as being a separate issue. This is not intended to be a land bank. I think if we receive property or buildings, we would look at selling them in order to have the monies to be able to support. Because oftentimes what we're looking at is matching dollars. These dollars will help us to leverage other possibilities through federal grants or other agencies that may be able to receive federal grants and need a match amount in order to make it successful.
And correct me if I'm wrong, for a land bank to be truly successful, we need a partnership of the county in order to scrub taxes off and that sort of thing.
There's a lot that goes involved with that, yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Ms. Claire?
I noticed maybe you can explain, I noticed 3 or 4 times it talks about rental housing, and I'm not sure how it affects, like reserve rental housing. What does that mean? Or funding of rental assistance? Are you helping the rental house?
I think it's the creation of housing that would be rental in nature. It would be the creation of housing that would be rental in nature.
The creation, not some rental house that's already there.
I don't believe so. I think, the idea is to try and support projects that are being created in order to create additional affordable housing.
That's what I need to know.
I'll review language to ensure that that's clearly stated, but I believe that that's our intent, that this housing trust fund is there to create new housing projects that would either be for purchase or rental. Oftentimes, I think of the projects that are done with that we did with Cornerstone, or that we've done with Pioneer, and that those would be the types of projects that we're really looking at doing, is finding someone that's qualified in this area and helping them to to bring a project to fruition.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, I guess I'm trying to get my hands around this a little bit. This is just simply, this would be a mechanism where the city, either grants or donations, could accumulate money. Is that correct? And then we could
Yes.
allocate it to various organizations. And we have, you just mentioned Cornerstone, Pioneer Group, Habitat for
THA,
Humanity.
Habitat.
Topeka Housing Authority. Is that, we would still look through those same groups? This is simply a...
Well, I think those are
Places to
examples
go.
of the groups that we would go with, because those are the ones that have been doing work locally. We would consider anyone that would come. There may be another organization that we don't know about today that was created that can do this type of housing, that may come to us if they have a project or decide that, they're in Kansas City and they want to be here also. And so you don't know what organization might exist that would be interested in funding. But those are the types of organizations that we would look at partnering with.
And if I may follow up,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And right now, it's our intent or our thought that this would not be taxpayer funded. This would simply be a conduit the city sets up to accumulate these funds. Is that correct?
Correct. If you look at the current budget proposal that we have, there is no funding to put into the Housing Trust Fund that's being created with this. At this point, there is no funding that would be provided by the city for this.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question on that real quick. What's it cost to operate this animal? There's staff time, I'm sure
Yeah,
there's
the
legal
staff
filings
time
that have
would
to be
be an
done.
analysis. I don't know how much time was spent on the last one, but I know many hours were spent by Ms. Hahn related to the Pioneer Project that was worked on for many months, off and on. And I think, you'd have to pick the projects. Some are simple. When you do the projects, they're very simple, but there can be amount of time to bring it to fruition as a project.
Okay. My only fear with that is that we'll spend more money trying to set something up than we'll actually be able to deploy. And housing is an important thing to the community. I just don't want to spend a bunch of money trying to develop something that then...
Well, I think the last comment that I would have related to that is whether the trust fund exists or not, if we have an opportunity to partner to create affordable housing, we're going to be working on that project. As we saw, those are opportunities that we want to pursue. And we've been successful with each of those organizations to create some good housing for individuals in this community.
Excellent. Yeah.
So with this plan, Joanne, who lives in my district there, she's a good friend of mine. Would this plan be free to those that are getting out of jail? I mean, because I know a lot of times, they don't have anything. They're.
This doesn't specifically address that type of thing. What it would do is if there was an organization that wanted to create housing that would support them, and they came to us with a project and said, we need $100,000 in order to make this work, and we happen to have that much in our trust fund, they could submit an application to us for that money in order to be able to create a project. And so then we would consider, are they meeting the tenets of what the Housing Trust Fund was created for? And if they were, and it was the decision that it should be funded in order to create that type of housing, that would be something we would consider approving. So it isn't necessarily that we're picking a particular project or helping an individual to get into a home. What we're trying to do is work with organizations that would create that type of housing, would want.
Like Cornerstone, they do
Right.
that. They let you stay there like 3 months.
Yeah, so if they had a project that they proposed that met a targeted area that meets the guidelines that are established in this, then we would consider their project and decide whether it should be funded.
Well, I just see that as a big need, especially with the vets and the mentally ill right now, and that's why I'm asking how would that relate to them? Or would it be funding that could help them get into, so you're just saying helping a different organization, not directly helping them
Right.
directly?
We're not looking at directly. We currently have a few programs that we administer that help directly, like Shelter Care Plus. And so we already do a few of those, but those are from programs that already exist.
And I know those are all well and good, but at the end of the day, they have to be homeless. And I never could wrap my mind around why can't we help them before they get to that step? And I know that's part of that program, that they have to have their lights cut off, or they have to be, that eviction notice. Why can't we help them before they get that eviction notice?
I think that is a bigger discussion, broader
You're right.
policy
It
discussion,
is.
not related to
You're
this
absolutely
particular
right.
issue
But it's a
that we're
discussion we should have, because that's just something that I just hate. Most of the, like LEAP and the homeless and all of those, you have to have your stuff shut off before an agency can, and I never did understand that, because it costs more money to turn it on or to keep it on, to get it turned back on, and I never could wrap my hands around that as
Right.
well. So that's why I'm asking these questions where these are concerned, because
The other comment that I'll have is as we, in a couple of weeks, we'll be bringing forward the Affordable Housing Task Force recommendations. And I think you'll see some things in those recommendations that relate to those types of comments that you're making, that group has been discussing.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Quick question on it. So if somebody wanted to give money to this, is it considered a charitable donation that's tax deductible, or do we have to have a 501c3 component in addition to this in order to make those gifts charitable?
It should be to a governmental organization.
Yeah, I think there's ways you can do it, I just don't know.
Yeah, the specific we would have to look at, but I believe that it can be.
Okay.
Most of the time, governmental organizations you can give funding to, and it is tax exempt or meets the guidelines regarding a charitable donation.
I certainly
But
would
we
want
would
that to
need
be an option.
verify that.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. Well, a couple of the meetings that I had with them, which has been a couple of years ago, it was circled around the quality of life or the quality of living within the current rental stock. So how is this going to help that? I mean, are we going to be rehabbing people's rental properties, or are we going to be building new facilities for this money to go to? How is that going to work?
My answer to that comment would be that we have the opportunity to consider applications that might fit both of those. If we knew that there was, say, there was an organization that had rental housing that supported affordable, and they were in the process of selling, and we had an application that would renovate those in order to make them usable again based on their current condition at the time of the sale, we might be able to assist them in order to put those units back into the mix as available units. But also looking at the opportunity that may exist to create new units, and that might be the partner that we would work with.
Is the city going to be involved in purchasing any of these homes or this land, or?
That would not be, it would be the funding mechanism in order to allow that nonprofit organization or the person that would make the application to be able to do their project. They would be the ones that would initiate all of those processes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Ms. Heller?
Well, what's being discussed right now, and the sort of the missing link in all of it, was discussed by Jump earlier, and even more recently, and that is that perhaps we need to consider refreshing our affordable housing plan, which was done back in 1990 and hasn't been updated since then. Because one of the missing links that the Jump folks told me that they liked when we met with the city manager was to perhaps look at this bigger picture, take what's been an affordable housing task force for a couple of years, sort of ad hoc, but has the players that are doing the affordable housing activity now. Look at structuring an assessment of where we are and what exactly we need, and then what the latest and creative ideas that people have picked up from around the country, or ideas that people have had locally, like the tiny house movement, or we want to get infill housing in, so maybe we could prioritize that and incentivize it. Whatever those ideas are, to get that plan, have those nonprofit providers and for-profit providers that are out there, let them do the work, but perhaps have that affordable housing task force morph into an affordable housing alliance or something like that met at least once a year to just come together with people like Jump and so on to say, where are we? How much progress did we make this year? What do we still need to do? Is it still the same? Anybody got ideas? Anybody know of do we need to raise money? Do we need to work together? Because somebody has to raise the money unless we get really lucky. We've had the trust fund ever since that 1990 meeting, but we didn't need it because the nonprofits were connecting on their own with the money that they needed. They still are doing that. So it could be that it could still lay fallow and not be needed, just be in better shape with us updating the policy. But perhaps that dynamic of having that affordable housing plan and having those providers, however they meet throughout the year, because they meet and work together. But, once a year, have sort of a town hall meeting where we come together and refresh that, because that can drive the ideas for where the grants could be, or doing some fundraising for a particular need that people have identified. And that could be a missing link that we haven't had that could bring this alive. Whether it's built into this particular policy or whether it happens concurrently.
Thank you. Other comments? Questions?
You got one?
Yes, sir.
Does any other communities had an affordable housing trust fund that they had good results with, and is that how we're modeling ours?
There are a number of communities that do, and we were provided by Jump an example of Lexington, Kentucky that has one, and there are some others that exist. Lawrence has one, yes, that's a good example as well.
Okay.
They had Des Moines, somebody from Des Moines come and visit along the way. They run some of their federal money through their trust fund and do their planning jointly. They had corporate money and so on, it varies.
Oh dear.
So what happens now?
Yeah.
For right now, I think, obviously I took some notes here related to things for us to go back and review and consider. I would ask that if there are other items that you're concerned about related to the language of this ordinance, that you please provide them to me. And then I will rehash, see if there are any changes, work with legal to make any changes that we deem desirable and that I feel were good changes and suggestions, and then I'll bring back another document. It'll probably be a few meetings from now.
Excellent. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Moving on to announcements then. Ms. Heller.
Oh. City manager first?
No, we need to read the agenda.
that's right.
Agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have one mayoral proclamation, Ronald McDonald House Day. We have a presentation, Sustainability Advisory Board Annual Report. We have one board appointment. We have 2 denial of tort claims under the consent agenda. And we have approval of as an action item, we have approval of the 2019 social service grant recommendations. And then non-action items, we have discussion on International Property Maintenance Code amendments, discussion on the 2019 through 2021 Neighborhood Revitalization Plan, and discussion on the city retailer sales tax extension.
City manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a few items tonight. The first 2 are simple. Reminder that there is a budget workshop Saturday, June 16th from 9 to noon at the Law Enforcement Center. All are invited. This is open to the public. Also, we have this Friday, the Strengthening Police and Community Partnership Program will be holding their event. There's been a lot of planning done with this. Right now, we have 94 participants that are a strong cross-section of the community that will be participating in that event and providing a presentation at the end regarding their recommendations. The last item that I'd like to cover is read some comments that I received from Utilities Department Director Bob Sample regarding one of his employees who reached a great accomplishment. Leadership Greater Topeka has more than 1,000 alumni, with nearly 70% still living and active in the Topeka area since 1984. I'm pleased to announce the City of Topeka has added yet another one of our own to this elite group of alumni. Sylvia Davis completed this program this year and graduated in May. Sylvia began her career with the city in August of 2004 as a landscape architect, working with the city's stormwater program at the Water Pollution Control Division. Over the years, she has taken an interest in management and leadership and has worked her way up through the organization, where she is currently the general manager of the Water Pollution Control Division. For those of you who know Sylvia, you understand why she is a rising superstar for the city of Topeka. Sylvia has developed incredible management and leadership skills. Sylvia is inspired by her love for the community and compassion for people, and a true passion to make a difference in all aspects of her life and the lives of others. Congratulations, Sylvia, on your completion of the Leadership Greater Topeka program. We are fortunate to have you on the City of Topeka team and look forward to seeing what the future has in store. I'll end with a quote from Sylvia that Bob provided. What motivates me for almost 14 years is the appreciation I have for the people that work for our city day in and day out, and the commitment they share in making Topeka a better place to live, work, and play. Supporting our staff who spend their days providing for our citizens is something that I am extremely grateful for. So congratulations to Sylvia in completing Leadership Greater Topeka.
And Mr. City Manager, she's out here.
Is Sylvia out there?
Yes.
There you are, Sylvia.
As an alumni of that program, it was quite the experience for me, and I hope it was for you as well, so congratulations. It's too bad you weren't part of the best class ever, though.
2004?
2012, best class ever.
That's all I have, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, I hope everybody in town's been out and about. The river float was fabulous over Memorial Day. There've been lots of meetings. I think everybody at this table has been involved in issues and committee meetings steadily, even over that break. I personally am wearing my Mulvane Art Fair pendant that I got this weekend at the art fair. It was wonderful, well-attended, perfect weather. Even the Kansas torrential storm the night before, just to make sure they all knew what they were doing. My historic Old Town neighborhood had a barbecue smoke-off on Saturday. David Douglas makes really good barbecue, I can tell you that. Had the opportunity last week also to go to the dedication of Claire's Courtyard at the library, another endowed super enhancement that is pending for our community. It was really heartwarming. The city manager, I was at both the visitation as well as the funeral for our lost officer, Trey McCluskey, this weekend. City manager was there, mayor was also there for the funeral, and pretty much everybody who wasn't covering a shift at the police department. It was a pretty incredible. Holy Name Church was full. And before that, Penwell Gables on Friday, people really turned out, and the family really appreciated it, and so know that we were well represented on that very sad occasion. I think that's it. Pass it
Ms.
along.
Claire?
Want to remind everybody of the concerts in the park at Garfield Park. We have one June 18th at 7:30 and July 2nd at 7:30. North Topeka Community Band, take your lawn chair, sit under the shade and listen.
Wonderful. Ms. Ortiz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was going to take credit for Sylvia till she stood up, but if you don't know her, she's a good person to work with, and congratulations to you again, Sylvia. I just have a couple things. Brendan, if you haven't been to the zoo, you need to go see the sea lions, and I think they're here till the 17th. It's standing room, literally standing room only, and everybody is really, really enjoying it. And I think that just goes to show that, you know, we have a good director that he's been thinking outside the box since he's got here, and we appreciate you, appreciate staff, and I just can't say enough good things about it. So if we can just try to get the word out and let everybody know, because there's still people that are just like an ooh, ah, I think that'd be worth it. I bumped into some of the camera crews on 13, and I didn't see them here tonight, but I wanted to give them a shout out. You know, they took my application for those smoke detectors, and they both got them in their house because they don't want me to call them out no more. So I appreciate that. You know, Chief, I'm gonna not talk about smoke detectors and that they're free and that they're, you know, we need to have them. I'm gonna let that go tonight, but I'll get with you. We'll see where we're at next week, okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to congratulate Shawnee Heights. They had some magnificent results in softball. They, for the second year, they've went undefeated and won the Class 5A Girls Championship. I believe the boys' baseball, I believe they got second at state. And Peyton Carson, Dean Carson's one of my great friends in middle school and high school. It's his son. He was named the Gatorade, what is it here? Kansas Gatorade Player of the Year for baseball. Just a great guy, also swimming, and the longtime coach of Highland Park basketball, Ken Darting, who's also one of my neighbors. It was just announced a couple days ago that he's going to be the Shawnee Heights basketball coach. So even though I hate it when he plays Highland Park now, but yeah, Highland Park's still great. But it's really looking forward to just a lot of great kids out there, and lucky to be a part of that organization. So thank you, congratulations.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Mays? Mr. Cohen?
I just want to say thanks for coming over to the west side. Topeka Gives was today. We have no numbers yet. I tried looking them up, and the news hasn't reported them yet. So anyway, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Mr. Lesser?
Yes, Mr. Emerson is correct. Shawnee Heights had a really good run. I think third place finish in the baseball playoffs, and that third place finish was because Seaman took first. So congratulations to my alma mater and Coach Bushnell on his 8th state championship. Quite a dynasty. So congratulations. Thank you.
Well, the only comments I have this evening are to remind everyone that now that summer has smacked us in the face, please remember that your pets cannot cool off as quickly as you can. Mostly if they're stuck outside, so please remember to keep them in the shade, give them plenty of water. Everybody loves their dogs and cats, we hope, and we want them to stay healthy with all this heat that's suddenly arrived. Thank you for enduring me in this spot tonight. This is my first time at the helm.
Good job. And you're not done.
Indeed, I am not done, but I wanted to thank you all for putting up with my shenanigans. So, with that, I will defer to Lisa for the motion for the first executive session.
Motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 20 minutes for consultation with the city's legal counsel to discuss attorney-client privilege matters regarding potential litigation as justified by KSA 75-4319B2. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Financial and Administrative Services Director Nikki Lee, Associate City Attorney Nick Jefferson, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
Is there a motion? Second? All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
Just for everybody's information, we have two.
Two executive
so they-
sessions, that's correct.
People want to see us.
Yep.
I don't know. So they know they should go home.
Councilmember Lesser. We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the motion is approved. The executive session will begin when the room is clear. Thank you all for coming this evening. Second executive session, if Ms. Robertson would give the parameters.
The motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 30 minutes to discuss personnel matters related to non-elected personnel in order to protect the privacy of those discussed as justified by KSA 75-4319B1. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, and Human Resources Director Jackie Russell. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
Is there a motion? So moved. Second? Motion and a second. All those raise your right hand. Motion carries. We'll go into executive session when the room is clear. The executive session has ended with no action taken. There being no other business before the body, the meeting is adjourned.